Hey guys, Dr. Garcia, and today what we want to talk about, I want to talk to you guys about a symptom that people come in with very commonly that a lot of times they might not think of as a big deal. It's annoying, it's something that they bring up, but it's not something that they are taking too seriously. And that symptom is bloating. Okay, I'm sure maybe you've had bloating at times, I have, and it's a very common symptom. And so what I want to talk about today is really what bloating means, okay, and what are the main reasons why we get bloated, and what we can do about it. Okay, so really there's three main reasons. There's really four. The obvious one is if you eat beans, obviously you might get bloated, or if you have a certain food that your body might be intolerant to, that will cause bloating. So that's something right off the bat. Obviously, if you're reacting to a specific food, then at least temporarily you have to stop eating that food if you want the bloating to go away. Unless you have one of these factors, sometimes fixing these might allow you to eat the foods that you might be currently reacting to. Okay, so the three big things that we're going to talk about. The first one is enzymes. And really it's a lack of enzymes. Okay, so what digestive enzymes do, our body makes digestive enzymes, and those enzymes help us to digest food, help us to break down food so we can absorb it and get the good out of our food. Okay, and maybe you've gone to Sprouts or gone to Whole Foods or gone to a health food store and asked for digestive enzymes, and that's great. Most of the enzymes that people get, or that you can get in the health food stores, are what are called pancreatic enzymes. These are things like protease and lipase and maybe bromine and these other common pancreatic enzymes that are packaged together. And those enzymes are good. Pancreatic enzymes are good. We actually use them in the office quite a bit, but not usually for digestive function and digestive, like for bloating specifically. What we use pancreatic enzymes, or these quote unquote digestive enzymes, for is for inflammation. They actually work good as kind of like a natural anti-inflammatory. So like something, an alternative to ibuprofen or to Advil. Okay, so but there are a couple of instances where I think those could be useful. But I want to talk about what we use more, and what I find is more useful as far as really fixing root causes of the problem of why we're getting bloated in the first place. Okay, and the first enzyme we want to talk about is what's called HCl, okay, or hydrochloric acid. And what hydrochloric acid is, it's stomach acid. Okay, so our stomach makes hydrochloric acid, it makes stomach enzymes. And these enzymes are very, very important. Okay, number one, they help to sterilize our food. Okay, so if our body's not making enough digestive enzymes, which is something that's very common, okay, then what happens is we're not able to really digest the food as effectively as we should. That food tends to kind of sit in the stomach, it tends to ferment. Okay, and that fermentation, it causes gas and it causes bloating. All right, so hydrochloric acid is very, very important. Again, our body should make it, but there's a couple of conditions where our body can struggle to make hydrochloric acid. Number one is as we get older. It's natural as we get older that our body doesn't make as much hydrochloric acid. Okay, so then our digestive function tends to become more sluggish, and we don't digest our food properly, and we can become more bloated and more full. So that's one condition, is just as we get older. The second condition is if our bodies run down. Okay, so in order to make hydrochloric acid, this stuff, it's literally like battery acid. Okay, it has a pH of about 2. Okay, that's very, very acidic, and our body actually makes this stuff. Okay, it concentrates water, and it concentrates it more and more and more and more, eventually into this stuff that's called hydrochloric acid. That's a very, very energy dependent system. Okay, so it requires a ton of energy for our body to make hydrochloric acid. So, you know, if we're run down, if we're not sleeping enough, if we're, you know, maybe if we're over exercising and just expending more energy, then our body's not going to have, you know, the adequate energy to make hydrochloric acid. Okay, so some symptoms, how you can kind of tell if hydrochloric acid is an issue is generally you get bloated pretty quickly after you eat. You know, it's you know, within maybe 30 minutes of eating, if you start feeling bloated, that could be a sign of hydrochloric acid. Okay, another sign or another indication that you might need hydrochloric acid is if you have a lot of like belching, a lot of burping. A lot of times, even with like drinking water, if you drink water and you just feel like you have to burp afterwards, that can be a sign that your body needs more hydrochloric acid. Okay. So another enzyme that our bodies require and that we find that is deficient in a lot of people are what are called bile salts. Okay. Bile salts are actually produced in your liver, stored in your gallbladder, and then released into your digestive system as part of the digestive process, especially after you've been eating fats, good healthy fats. Okay, so think about bile salts as gallbladder enzymes. Okay, so we find a lot of people need bile salts, number one, because a lot of people have had their gallbladder removed. Okay, so if you don't have a gallbladder, you can help yourself out tremendously. You can really improve your digestive function by taking bile salts. It's kind of like giving your body your gallbladder back. Okay, so basically what you do is you find bile salts and you take those with your meals, okay, and it's kind of like replacing your gallbladder, all right? Other times, if you still have your gallbladder, sometimes what happens is the bile ducts, the ducts that go from the liver to the gallbladder, there's thousands of little microtubules. These things are microscopic, and there's literally thousands of them that kind of concentrate down into the gallbladder. And sometimes that bile gets thick and it gets sluggish, okay? And the bile has a hard time flowing through there, all right? And so in that case, in those cases, bile salts can be very effective as well, okay? So again, you can find bile salts in most of the health food stores. You can probably find bile salts online, and they can be very effective. Usually what we see when people need bile salts is when they have a hard time digesting fat. Okay, so if you have an avocado, or if you have more of like a greasy meal and that causes bloating, then that's an indication maybe that your gallbladder, your liver gallbladder is sluggish, and you might need to take some bile salts. Okay. And the third one, we already talked about the pancreatic enzymes. Again, we don't use those a lot specifically for digestive function, but they can be helpful. Okay, so that's something that you can also try. We kind of use that as like the third line of defense. You know, this is most common. Then we'll use the bile salts, and sometimes we'll add pancreatic enzymes to the mix. Okay, so that's enzymes. The second issue that we want to talk about is something that's called dysbiosis. Okay. Okay. Dysbiosis it's kind of a fancy term for an imbalance in our gut bacteria. Okay, so we've all heard that we have good bacteria in our digestive tract. Okay, so we have good guys. We can also have bad guys. Okay, a lot of times I'll say it's like having weeds in the garden. Okay, if you have too many weeds in the garden doesn't look good. If we have too many of these bad bugs in our digestive tract, then that can cause a problem as well. Okay, what happens is that when we have dysbiosis, when we have more of these bad bugs, those bad bugs can also ferment the food that we eat, and that fermentation can cause bloating, it can cause gas, okay, depending on where it is. So common imbalances that we see, one of them is something that's called SIBO. Okay, Maybe you guys have heard about SIBO. It's kind of a new hot topic. A lot of doctors are talking about SIBO, and what that stands for is it stands for small intestine bacterial overgrowth. Okay, so it's an overgrowth of bacteria specifically in the small intestine. Okay, so without getting too anatomical, we have a small intestine and we have a large intestine. The large intestine is lower, the small intestine is upper. The large intestine is where the bulk of our beneficial bacteria should be. The small intestine, it should be sterile. Okay, there shouldn't be a whole lot of bacteria in the small intestine. That's where our body absorbs nutrients. But it's very common for the bacteria in the large intestine we call it translocate, where that bacteria kind of moves up and migrates and gets up into the small intestine. And what happens when there's bacteria in the small intestine is that our food tends to ferment too quickly because that bacteria is up too high, and it causes a lot of gas, a lot of pressure. That's when our stomach really gets distended. It's when we have an overgrowth of bacteria in the small intestine. Okay, treating small intestine bacterial overgrowth, that's something that it can for sure be done. It's usually something that it's kind of hard to do on your own. All right, maybe you can look at kind of like a SIBO-based diet, but usually you have to use what are called antimicrobial herbs, specific herbs, and specific what are called biofilm disruptors that help your body be able to kill these things. And I would recommend using working with a practitioner or a doctor that has experience treating SIBO. Okay, but that's definitely something to consider if you're having a lot of gas, a lot of bloating, a lot of stomach discomfort. So SIBO. Also, we can have yeast. Yeast overgrowth is very common. We tend to enjoy a lot of sugars, and the standard American diet is very high in carbohydrates and in refined and processed sugars, and sugars tend to feed yeast and they tend to feed bacteria as well. So, for having the standard American diet, that can cause overgrowth of SIBO and yeast. Another very common cause of yeast overgrowth is the use of antibiotics. So antibiotics they're needed at times, but the overuse of antibiotics has really we're having an epidemic now of dysbiosis. Okay, so the antibiotics, they kill the bacteria, they kill all the bacteria. They kill the beneficial bacteria, the healthy bacteria in our gut, and they tend to promote overgrowth of yeast, and they tend to promote overgrowth of these bacteria that can migrate up into the small intestine. Okay, so we can also have parasites. Parasites are more common than a lot of people would think. So again, if you're having a lot of intestinal discomfort, a lot of bloating, a lot of gas, these are things that you want to suspect might be there. And again, if you are having SIBO, yeast, parasites, these type of conditions, I would recommend using a practitioner that's experienced in treating these to help resolve them. Okay, so we have enzymes, we have dysbiosis, and then the third one are hormones. Okay, so sometimes it doesn't have anything to do with the digestive tract itself. It has to do with the imbalance of hormones. I'm sure with the ladies out there, you experience this. Around your cycle, you get a little bit more bloated, feel a little bit more full, feel a little bit more puffy, and that's because of a shift or a change in hormones. Okay, and so with the hormones, it's interesting because obviously, some people, when they have their cycle, they get bloated. Some people don't. Sometimes with women, maybe 1 month they will have bloating, another month they maybe not have as much. So it's not specifically the hormones themselves, it's how the hormones are responding to our body. Okay, and then there's something that we're seeing right now that it's another epidemic, and it's what's called hormone resistance. Okay, so what that means is that we have plenty of hormones, Okay, but our bodies are becoming resistant to those hormones. So those hormones aren't working as well in our body. Okay, so the way to think about this, maybe you've heard of what's called insulin resistance. Okay, insulin resistance is a diabetic term. It's kind of a pre-diabetic condition, and it's very common. It's talked about a lot. And in that condition, what happens is your body makes plenty of insulin. You have lots of insulin, okay, but you have signs of insulin deficiency, okay, because the insulin isn't working in our body, right? So for our cells, we have a cell, then we have a cell receptor, okay, and we have all the hormones out here. We have maybe estrogen, we have thyroid hormone, we have insulin, we have all these hormones, and for those hormones to have an effect inside our cells, they have to bind to these receptor sites to actually communicate with the cell. Okay, a lot of times what happens is these receptor sites have become blunted, they've become dull, so they don't hear the signal as much. It's kind of like when if you have kids, when you yell at the kids, initially it has a pretty good effect, right? You can get their attention, they'll listen to you, but if you continue to yell at them and continue to yell at them, they can start tuning you out, okay? Another example that we'll use a lot is that, our car needs gas, right, in order to run. We need fuel. And if we're out of gas, the car's not gonna work very good. So if you go to the gas station, and if you just pour gasoline all over the roof of the car, it's not gonna do anything, right? You have to actually get the gas into the tank for it to be effective. And it's the same thing with these hormones. If you have, all these hormones in the bloodstream, they have to get inside the cell to have an effect, and these, the receptor sites become blunted. They become blunted because of inflammation. Okay, we've heard, the term inflammation. I'm sure you guys have heard inflammation. Pretty much all disease starts with inflammation in our bodies, inflammation in the cells. Okay, so what can cause inflammation? Again, it goes back to diet. It goes back to if we're having a lot of refined sugars, if we're having processed foods, if we're eating foods that have pesticides and herbicides, and if the foods aren't organic, that's going to create inflammation. If we're exposed to toxins, if we have heavy metals and mold and spores, all these things create this kind of low grade, sometimes high grade inflammation in our bodies, which over time dull these hormone receptors, and we become what's called hormone resistant, or maybe we become weight loss resistant, or we become insulin resistant, or our bodies just aren't feeling good. Okay, so again, those are the three common signs of bloating. So if you are experiencing bloating, I want you to take it seriously, okay? Because it's a sign. Our bodies are amazing. Our bodies have this ability to heal themselves, okay? And if our body's out of balance, then what they do is they create a symptom, okay? And bloating is a symptom. It is a sign that your body is somehow out of balance. So, I would suggest, trying to figure out where your body's at, okay? Maybe start taking some digestive enzymes. Okay, maybe you can also start to decrease the amount of refined foods, the amount of sugar that you're having in your diet, the kind of refined grains, the flour products. These things all tend to feed these the yeast and the bacteria. Okay, looking at decreasing inflammation. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. If you guys have any questions, in the comments below, feel free to reach out, and hope that helps you guys out. Thanks.